Hey, you're listening to the Victims and Villains podcast, a podcast extension of the nonprofit that educates and engages individuals on mental health awareness through pop culture. I'm Black Nerd Magic, and on this episode, we are talking about 2020's romantic comedy, The Photograph. Hope you enjoy.
Would you really classify this as a romantic comedy? This felt more like a drama to me.
I mean, lakeith-stanfeld's in this, so there's bound to be some laughs. I had some laughs. My sense of humor is kind of weird sometimes, but that's just me.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I definitely had laughs, but most of it came at the expense of some of the awkward humor that's in this. The scene between May and the kids, like first interaction, so great. Yeah. We are joined by, because romance is in the air, we are joined by Miss Lucy Eden, who is not the author of one book, but 10 books. So welcome to the Victims and Villains podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. And it's funny that you wouldn't necessarily classify this as a rom-com, because I write romantic comedies, and that's, the exact kind of stories I write, because my stories tend to mimic life, and my tagline is funny. I'm like cheating and looking at a book. They're funny, dramatic, and steamy, because that's how life is. But I feel like if you laugh out loud at least once, it's a comedy. Or if it's something that's not necessarily hilarious or slapsticky, but maybe just tongue-in-cheek, or you go, or that cringy, awkward humor. I love it. Because it's real. I love it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess by that definition, I guess I could classify this film as it. Celeste, like, to your point, like, the first time I met lakeith-stanfeld as an actor was either Get Out or his haunting portrayal of Snoop Dogg in Straight Outta Compton. So I've never seen him do, like, this is probably the lightest thing I think I've ever actually seen him do. But before we get into the movie, let's talk a little bit about your books. So I'm going to shout out, because I believe giving respect where respect is due. You came to us through a suggestion of our friends over at Boobies and Newbies podcast. If you guys
love it.
Have never heard of Boobies and Newbies, please go check them out. Kelly is great people. She's been on the show several times. So my question for you, the first question is that you've been doing this for only a few years, and yet you've already racked up quite the resume of novels, novellas, and even your own short stories as well. How did you kind of get started with writing, and specifically why the romance genre? I'm curious about that.
I love the romance genre because, especially as a writer, I love the romance genre because there is a very there's a very specific ending that pretty much every romance novel has, and the complicated part is getting somebody to get on the ride with you when they know exactly where they're going. So and it's also easy to write a story when you know how it's going to end. A lot of times you just kind of get lost when you're like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? But whenever you get off track, okay, whatever happens, these two or more people have to end up together. So it's easy to kind of guide yourself. And it's also like, a really, it's a really fun challenge, because the genre of romance is so incredibly diverse. Your stories can literally be about anything, anywhere, as long as, there's a love story that's central to the plot. So, I've written bear shifters, I've written, romances, I've written, werewolves, I've written, people who live in New York, people who live in Barbados, people who are, investment bankers or bakers or, actors. It's really, the sky's the limit. You can anything you can imagine, like, there is a romance novel written about it. And there isn't, it just means you haven't found it. Or, you can just write it yourself. So.
And I guess like this is and Kelly and I have had many conversations about the romance genre and kind of like the misconceptions that actually lie within it. And I guess for me, like you guys behind the scenes, I lost power very briefly when I came back in. You guys were talking about horror. And horror is definitely a genre that I'm very passionate about, but it's one of those things that can be very repetitive and very formulaic at times. And so I guess my question for you is, like, when you're still writing in the same genre, what's your process for keeping it fresh and kind of keeping it original and making sure that every story that you're telling is different than the ones that precede it?
The easiest way for me to do that, and I keep using the word easy, and I don't want to give the false impression that writing romance books are easy, because it's not, but the easiest way for me is you really have to focus first on your characters, get to know them really well, and they become like real people. And your book, if I wrote 2 different books where both of the female leads are lawyers and the male leads are doctors, if the characters are different, if they're their own people with their own personalities and backstories and families and histories, you're going to get 2 different stories, because a lot of it is just reactionary. Like if somebody said this to me, how would I react? What would I say? And when I said that thing, well, what would that person say, or what would they do? So it's really, if your books are character driven, more than getting caught up in the plot or the settings or the world building or things like that, if you really, really focus on making your characters as real and fleshed out and as 3D as possible, you can never write the same story twice, because everybody's different.
And I guess a lot of the things that I've come to learn about the romance genre has been very much through my friendship with Kelly. And so one of the things that she's kind of introduced to me through her podcast has been kind of how you also have these series that are episodic, almost, where you're following characters and kind of like you're getting to see the romance develop into from not just a one night stand or a fling, but like actually like relationships and marriages, and even watching characters grow old. Has that been something that you've explored yet, or do you plan to do so in the future?
Oh, absolutely. I have my longest series is Lucy Eden, is called the Everything's Better series. All my books pretty much take place in the same universe. Even the paranormal romances take place in, the same universe. Like in my world, they're just, shifters that exist with, quote unquote normal people that just don't know they're shifters, but they're there. Yeah, and it's actually, great to really catch up on other characters from previous books and see where they're going. Because, again, if you focus really, really intensely on your characters and making them real people, your readers will fall in love with them too. Because you have, like, it's all emotional. It's all about human interaction. So, whether you are, an actor or an author or a podcaster or whatever, you are, at first, you are a human who is just made up of your your emotions, your experiences, your fears, your hopes, and you turn that into a character, and you write that character, and then you write another character who falls in love with that person, and you get to slowly watch them develop. So once you get to the end of that journey, as a reader, you've spent all this time, following these people, you kind of want to know more. You're curious. So that's why there's usually an epilogue, or if it's in a series, you kind of want to have those glimpses of, oh, well, what's so-and-so doing? Oh, I'm so glad they're still together. Or, oh, they're just, they're still fighting about that one thing. It's comforting. It's like visiting old friends.
Yeah, and I guess like you said the magic word that has now piqued my interest. Writing a paranormal romance in a grounded reality of the other series. Like you said, like all of them take place within the same universe.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges of like mixing other genres into the romance novel?
Well, again, I hate to sound like a broken record. But like, take for instance, Bear With Me, which is my first paranormal romance. It's about a woman who is an Instagram influencer who publicly embarrasses herself. She's a character from another book that's not a paranormal. She, embarrasses herself publicly, and to rehab her image, she goes to this secluded resort in the Catskill Mountains. And it's run by this, grumpy lumberjack type dude who also happens to turn into a bear at night. And that's the story. He is, he's a resort owner who turns into a bear at night, but he's also a person with emotions and feelings and experiences. And, that's kind of what shapes him. And he finds somebody else who he can, relate to, even though, it is opposite to track. They couldn't be more different. Eventually they connect on an emotional level, and that's kind of what sells you. It kind of makes it, it makes it okay that he turns into a bear at night. Because you get to go on that emotional journey with them.
And I guess the most important question that I have to ask is, where can people find the books and pick them up?
Oh, yeah. Well, you can go to my website, lucyeden.com, and all the links are there. My books are pretty much on every platform, regular sale, like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, all those places. And they're, paperbacks you can get from Amazon. Some of the paperbacks are on Barnes & Noble, but yeah, they're pretty easy to find. And my name, Lucy Eden, you just search it, and you can find all the things. I'm so bad at. I'm a writer. This is my job. I promise. Yeah, I'm really bad at selling myself. But yes, just type my name into the internet and they'll show you. But yeah, I have lots of books and you can get them in many places. Please buy them.
We'll have links in the descriptions below. The entire reason that we brought Lucy on, was to talk about the romantic comedy. I guess that's what we're rolling with for this episode. The Photograph, which, believe it or not, actually hit theaters well before the pandemic. It's strange to me watching that this movie takes place and came out last year. It feels like this movie is like
literally
2019
month before the pandemic.
Yeah,
because I remember it came out on Valentine's Day. We were all excited. We were all excited to see it, and I actually had a book signing in LA. And I remember just, the flight back and forth, like, there was no quarantine, but everyone was like kind of tense. There was a lot of hand sanitizer like flowing. And yeah, I got back on the 23rd, and then 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, we were all locked down. But yeah, it was 1 month.
Yeah, this was like one of the last film screenings I got to go to, because I'm a critic here in Seattle and everything, and so we were in the theaters, but we were first starting to hear about this COVID virus that was in China and everything, and many people still didn't know what it was. Many people thought it was still a cold. Many people thought, well, if it comes over here, it's not going to do much damage. And then 2 weeks later, the whole world changes. So yeah, it's almost like a time capsule, like a sense like this is what everything was before the whole world just shifted into something we'd never been through before.
Yeah, I missed this movie last year, so this was my first viewing of it, and this is probably one of like the highest, like, most praised romance films I've heard about in the most recent 5 years or so. I have thoughts, but But yeah, Celeste, I'm going to turn it over to you. I think people have heard my voice for a little bit too long.
Oh, no problem. Well, the thing that's refreshing about The Photograph is it's an African-American romance film that, doesn't really feel like a romance film of this era. This is almost like a throwback to what the 1990s was for African-American cinema and romance. You had films like Poetic Justice. You had Jason's Lyric. You had Love Jones. You had How Stella Got Her Groove Back. The Best Man. You had all of these films that really were showing that lovely side of African American characters, and most of them didn't deal with the stereotypes. And I think that Photograph does a great job of just showing how African Americans, we can also be in love too. Because I feel that sometimes if there's an African American film that deals with a couple being in love, there has to be some trauma in the background that supports them coming together or making the relationship stronger. Like, for instance, the bad version of this film could have been that Lakeith was this guy and he was like, a single father, and he had a crazy baby mama that kept coming at him, like talking about when he's going to come take care of the kids and where's the child support checks. And then, you could have had Issa-Rae being like this girl, who maybe was working in a strip club or something like that, and then they end up coming together and Lakeith kind of makes her into like a better person. But no, this film actually shows black people having like high jobs. Like, I mean, Lakeith is a photographer for a big place in, speaking of Lucy, and he's applying for a job in London. We have Issa, who's a curator in the museum. We have supporting characters who are working in the city, who have prominent positions, who have nice houses. There's no sense of there being like any like black trauma, or like there wasn't a scene involving like police brutality. There wasn't a scene of like, just violence or anything like that. It's just black people being normal black people, which we don't often get to see. You're mostly going to see a film about exceptional black people. We can't hardly get a film greenlit about normal black people. So it was great to see The Photograph kind of take a grounded approach when it came to African American romance. And I kind of wish that we had more films like this, and this wasn't just like a unique film in this era.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think those stories, those other types of stories are valid because they, there is a lot of truth in those stories. However, we are not a monolith, and, we want not just to not have the story about the stripper or, the single father. We want stories about every kind of black person, just like there's, every kind of movie about white people. We just want, just more diversity and more variety in the types of stories. And this was definitely one of those cases where it was just a story of, two people on a similar journey who fell in love. And I love that, the romance was central to the story, but there was more. It wasn't just us necessarily following two people around and watching them fall in love. And I could watch movies like that all day. But this one was also great because there was a full and rich story, the B story of her biological parents and her mom. And, there was definitely character growth. Like, they both grew from the experience, her just not wanting to end up like her mother, who, never opened herself up to love, to her making this huge leap and, starting this relationship where, she's, pretty much conditioned to believe that it's not going to work, but she's taking that chance anyway. And, Lakeith is, kind of doing the same thing. That line is, I don't want to be practical. I want to be with you. Like, that's, it's brave. It's really, that's the brave thing about love, because, the evil is better than the evil you don't know. Like, no, I don't want to be lonely, but I know what lonely is. I know how to navigate lonely. Lonely makes sense to me. Putting my heart out there, being with this person that excites me, ignites me, challenges me, makes me laugh. If I get to a point where I love it too much and it gets taken away, I don't know what that's going to feel like. But I do know what lonely is. And lonely feels safer because it's not. I know because I've been there. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, that's what I really did love about the story. And there wasn't any really cringy, stereotypical, material, because like, even, if those even stories where there are quote unquote stereotypes, if they're told the right way, they're beautiful. If they're not, they're not. So, yeah. So, I just think the movie was beautifully done, beautifully acted. I think a lot of the comedy really came from just their banter and their interaction, which really, helped us as viewers fall in love with the characters, which is, what you want. Like that's, that is big for me because I write a lot of what's called in the romance genre, it's called insta-love. And, it's something you have to really be good at selling, because it's like, oh, this person, met this person 3 days ago and now they're in love. I don't get it. But you have to sell it and make it work. And you do that with, people who are able to connect emotionally very quickly. And the chemistry between Lakeith and Issa-Rae was palpable. Like you just felt it. So it was great. I loved it. And I also loved that their jobs were so interesting. You got to learn, because I was saying earlier that I am kind of a nerd and I kind of like to know, like, what's going on behind the scenes, or, what does a curator do? What is his job at the paper? Why is he interviewing this guy? What is he hoping to get out of it? And that's separate from the love story. So it was really, there were just so many things you could talk about, when you talk about how great this film is. So yes. Oh, and also speaking of comedy, like, was that his brother or his brother-in-law? That was his brother. Yes.
Yeah, that was his brother.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, hilarious. Hilarious. Like, yeah.
Well,
that's the kind of married couple we all like aspire to be.
That is my jumping off point. I love Lil Ray Howie. He's been quickly shooting up as like one of my favorite, like, just secondary characters recently. I don't know why. Everything that he's in, whether it's something serious like Get Out or something goofy like Uncle Drew, like, I just really love him as a character, as an actor.
Did you see that new, I think it's on Netflix, the Eric Andre movie?
No, I need to though.
Bad Trip is good. I like that film.
It was so great. It was like, yeah, it was so well done. I loved it. But yeah.
But to your point, about this movie in particular, I feel like what helped me stay invested into these characters was the juxtaposition of the two storylines, where you have Lakeith and Issa-Rae going through their own love story, and then subsequently also reflecting on kind of the destruction of Issa-Rae's mother and father's relationship, and how that is like mirrored to her own relationship with Lakeith throughout the course of the film. And it's beautifully handled and beautifully done, and I feel like that's kind of one of the things that kind of turns me off about romance as a genre, and I hope that doesn't offend you. It's just not my cup of tea normally. But I feel like there was enough about these characters and enough of compelling about them, and that they got it going. I think one of the best running gags throughout the course of this film is the conflicting music taste that the two of them have. Yes. And then at the end, where she gives him the ticket to like the stadium concert to go see
Kendrick
Lamar. Yes. That really kind of showed her growth and kind of like was like a promise that like, you know, hey, like it paid off because they had so many different scenes where they were having like musical like disagreements.
Yeah. Yes, in the romance genre, we call that the grand gesture, where, you know, one character. Oh my goodness, hold on one second, I need to plug my laptop in. Yeah, in romance, we call that the grand gesture, where, you know, it's the, you know, the right before the happy ending when, you know, one character has to display growth in order to make the relationship work. Like, but, you know, you can't be the same person that you were in the beginning of the book or movie than you were at the end, especially when it's a love story, because you do have to change a little bit for the better, hopefully, to make the relationship work, and you have to sacrifice and give things up, and you know, that was what happened, and it was amazing. It was great. It was a really great payoff.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in this show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Yeah, relationships, they're not really just a thing where you become stale at. You know, you always have to be evolving. You always have to kind of like sacrifice things that you may want to do or things you may want to be in order to at least be in tandem with your spouse. Because, I mean, at a certain point, you know, when you were single, it's all about you. You know, you don't have to worry about responsibilities. You don't have to worry about worry about this person or that person about what you're doing. But when you're with somebody, then it gets to a point where it's like, okay, I can't just think about me anymore. I got to think about this other person. Like, I can't just make this big purchase without talking to this other person. You know, I can't really stay out to the hours of the night without telling this other person because they'd be worried about my safety. Like, it's a give and get. And I can understand if people do not want to go through that, you know, kind of sacrifice, because a lot of people love their freedom, and that's okay. Hey, if you like it, I love it. But when you come into a relationship, you have to know that it can't just be one-sided. It has to be two people working together, working, growing, evolving, whatever. You know, if one person's growing and the other one is staying still, then that's going to be an issue that can't be solved. And I think you see that when it comes to Christina and Isaac, which is a part of the flashbacks. You know, We're seeing that Christina is this small-town girl, but she has bigger dreams. I mean, she says that she wants to go to New York. She wants to be known. She wants to have her photographs in these magazines and displayed everywhere. And Isaac, you know, he's kind of cool with being where he is. Like, there's a scene where she asks him, like, do you want to do anything? Do you want more out of your life? And he's like, no, you know, I'm good where I'm at. You know, I got a house. I got a job. My friends are here. Like, what more could you ask for? And Christina, which I don't blame her, she's like, well, you know, I've been here my whole life. The world is bigger than New Orleans. I got to see what's new out here. And, you know, her mother kind of tells her, you know, do you expect that man to be able to take care of you? And do you expect to grow with him? And that kind of sticks in her head, even though she kind of doesn't like the way her mother gives it to her, but it's a harsh truth.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing too is that we find out later is, yes, they had that conversation where, you know, he was very, you know, I just want to, you know, this is fine for me. I just want to be here. But it's also, there was also a lot of underlying fear on his part of, you know, that he perhaps couldn't live up to her expectations, that he couldn't be good enough for her. So that's, you know, that's part of that, you know, do I stay where I am that's comfortable for me, even though it may not be what I necessarily want, but I know and I understand, or do I take a chance and possibly, you know, have something greater? And, you know, Christina was willing to take that chance and Isaac wasn't. And he, you know, he ended up regretting it, but, you know, it all works out in the end. But like, you know, May having this full picture of her biological parents and their story chose not to go that path, chose to, you know, take a leap and grow and change. And that's, you know, that's the thing as well, that, you know, in a relationship, it's not just about, you know, changing to compromise because there's another person involved. It's at the end of the day, no one else can make you happy. You have to make yourself happy. And if engaging in a long distance relationship and going to a Kendrick Lamar concert she ultimately did it for herself, which is a good thing, you know. And that's, you know, you know, in relationships, you compromise, you grow, you change, you do all of those things for the person you love because you love them. And because that person ultimately, you know, that relationship is something that brings you joy and makes you happy. And that's, you know, that's a good thing.
Perhaps what makes May's story so compelling is the the whole process of learning from your past and kind of like seeing like what she went through and what her parents went through, and kind of like you said, like learning from that and saying, you know, this was the mistake that, you know, my parents made before me. And there's even a scene in the end where her and Isaac meet for the first time, and it's her meeting her biological father for the first time, and it's this really heartbreaking scene that, you know, is kind of placed right alongside of the timing for Michael's resignation to leave the city to go to London, and kind of like really start to figure out like how they're going to work and make the long distance thing work, or if they're really going to make it happen. And is she going to repeat history with her, you know, from her parents, or is she actually gonna learn?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, you know, that's the journey of the character, and that's what makes it so great. That's why we're rooting for them, because, you know, we fell in love with them as well, and we also, you know, saw the pain that, you know, her mother's decision, and also ultimately Isaac's decision as well, takes two to tango, though, you know, what those decisions cause, those ripple effects, and she doesn't want that for herself, so she takes a chance. And it's, you know, it's really, you know, the letters that her mother gave her were really just an amazing gift, because, you know, it's basically her mother's way of saying, because her mother, you know, her stepfather was saying that she wasn't, you know, the best at, you know, showing her feelings or saying goodbye or being emotional or loving people. Like that's how she even said, that's how she shows her love. So the best gift that she could give to her daughter was just this naked honesty and saying, this is what I did, you know, don't do this. You know, her mother even said in an interview, I wish I was better at loving people. Like, you know, she, you know, you know, as a parent, you want your child to have more than you have and have things easier. So yeah, you know, it was a beautiful gift and a beautiful journey that Christina left to May, and it was a gift that May ultimately ended up not squandering. She used it well, just in time.
I love that line in particular, the way that she opens up. It's because the film opens up on her interview, and she says, "I wish I was as good at love as I am at working," and it really shows you kind of the journey very early on, foreshadows like how her own drive is really going to, and sacrifice is really going to set the stakes for like where her character ends up. And like you said, like we've been talking about, like relationships are give and takes. I know Celeste and I have talked about, several times off air about like the viewing habits of like what we watch versus what our significant other watches. And it's such a small like compromise, but it's like, all right, like why I enjoy the medium of film, like what difference does it matter like if I like this or not, and I'm getting to spend time with my favorite person, like, but it took a long time to process and understand that it's not just about me anymore, it's about this unit of people now. It's about me and my spouse.
Right. Yeah. Oh, totally. Like my husband loves terrible movies, just admittedly just awful movies, like the worse the better. And it's rough. I do love Mystery Science Theater, because at least it's like a terrible movie with funny commentary, but like without, like, I'm like, where's the little robot? Oh, we're just watching this? Oh no, I'm out of here. But yeah, I totally get it. It is, it is those little compromises, but ultimately you're doing it because, that person makes you happy. And yeah, spending time with the person that you love is great. It's like, it's as a romance author, it's really hard to explain what love is and why we love so intensely, because it does not make any sense at all. It's like it's this intangible phenomenon that we try to make sense of, but we all feel it at one time or another.
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback off that, because we often talk about finding the one. We often talk about finding a soulmate, and how like when you have that person, you got to hold on to them, because you don't know if you're ever going to get a chance. I remember what it was like with my current girlfriend when we were talking, and before we had actually like come into a relationship together. I had fears. I had worries. I was just coming off a pretty bad, not bad, but just like a not compatible relationship, a long-term relationship. And, my heart was kind of in a weak spot. And so I wasn't ready to really jump myself into the waters again of testing another relationship, because my trust had kind of faltered down, and I was finding it hard to really trust anybody. But, when I found my girlfriend and I was able to talk to her and get to know her, I was like, okay, like I could go and find somebody else out there easy, but I'm not going to be able to find anybody else like this. And this is another, goes back to the sacrifice thing. Staying committed to one person is not easy. There's millions of other people out there. There's millions of other options. We live in an age where there's so many options. Like, you can watch HBO Max, you can watch Netflix, you can go to this store, you can go to that store. You can go out with this person, you go out with this person. But with finding someone who's your soulmate or who's very important to you, you can't let that chance go. And we can see that Christina, she has some of those regrets, in the letters that she sends to May, that she wished that she would have been better at loving instead of working. Her drive was insatiable. Her drive is what helped her to become a photographer. She was able to accomplish her goals, but at what cost? She was able to find somebody. She was able to find a husband, that was dedicated to her and that loved her, but there was always that one that got away. And I think in this day and age with the dating scene, a lot of people have lost that kind of importance when it comes to choosing someone. So many people are easy to choose just the first person they think looks good, and then boom. But they're not willing to get to know them. They're not willing to go and take a few days to take it slow and steady and see where their head is at, see if they're compatible, see if they have the same interests, what their goals are. You know, will I be able to wake up every day seeing this face in the morning? You know, just those things. And I like that, you know, Michael and May towards the end, they realize that yes, it may be a long distance relationship. It may be something that's going to be much harder than what we had in New York, but we're going to make it work. You know, we're going to do whatever we can to make it work. And that's very important, because I've been in long-term relationships. Most often those things don't go well. They don't end well. And so at the end, you get kind of some hope that, hey, maybe these people can actually make it work.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Yeah, like relationships, they just are. Like anything that's worth having, you do have to work for. Like, you know, the whole concept of monogamy is actually, you know, scientifically against human nature, but it's like, you know, anything in the world. You want a certain type of body, you have to work hard for it. You want a certain type of job, you want to build a certain type of skill, you have to grind every day and practice and pay your dues. So, you know, relationships are the same way. Like anything that's really worth having, you know, it's you know, it takes effort, or else, you know, everybody would have it. So yeah, it's important. And then, you know, the more the couple or, you know, people in the relationship have to overcome, you know, the sweeter the victory is, the more the better the HEA is, because they've earned it, you know. Like it, you know, May went through a lot of pain, personal pain, in a very short time, to really learn that lesson that her mother was trying to teach her. And, you know, it paid off for her. But, you know, I'm sure, you know, she would have rather have not had to go through that pain to get that lesson. But, you know, those are the ones that stick. So yeah, anything that's worth having is you have to work for it. You know, if you want that one person, then, you know, you're going to have to do whatever it takes to make it work, whatever that means in your situation. Including, like, you know, flying back and forth to London, going to Kendrick Lamar concerts, chatting with 5- and 6-year-olds about ex-girlfriends.
I am so sorry that I set up this Kendrick Lamar running gag throughout this episode. The movie does it better, so go watch the movie. It's streaming on HBO Max. But one of the things that I wanted to kind of jump off of what you were talking about, Lucy, is the fact there's a scene between Christine and Isaac, and he says that wanting more can be a dangerous place to be. And we talked about this a little bit in Half Baked, where we were talking about, you know, finding, being content. And sometimes it's also about being patient when you're specifically in a relationship. My wife and I have, you know, talked about things a few years ago that, like, you know, I necessarily wasn't on the same page with her, and it took a couple years of her being patient with me and finally coming around to those things. And sometimes it's about sacrifice, but it's also about patience, because patience can really what you desire for it to be more, if it's not in the right season, or if the person's not in the right mental health, that's a dangerous place to be, like Isaac was talking about. But if you're patient with that person and you help, you know, walk them through what you exactly want and what you're looking for, it can really grow and actually help the relationship in the long run.
And, you know, it also boils down to that, to your wife, you were worth it. You were worth that, the wait and the patience, you know, and that's the, you know, the intangible, one of the intangible aspects of love. You know, we all, like, you know, you were saying earlier, we all have options, but for her, the only option was to wait for you because you're worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a commitment. Also, I wanted to jump on to the fact that not only do we have a love story with Michael and May, but also with their respective friends. You know, we see Kelvin Harris Jr. I forget what his character name is, but he plays Lakeith's friend in this film, and then we see May's friend in there, and we also see that they have a little bit of a love arc. You know, it's kind of like, yes, Andy, that's what it was. Thank you, Lucy. It was Andy. And we see they have a kind of little bit of a love arc too. You know, May's friend talks about how, like, hey, it's easy for me to just sit here, be lonely, you know, be in the dark, you know, be disappointed and stuff. But hey, you know, I feel like I really like this guy. And, you know, this is a feeling I'd never had before. And I want to, like, see where this goes. And I think it's something about it in a romantic film is beautiful, seeing when somebody gets to experience what love is that's never felt it before. You know, oftentimes people will think they're in love, but they don't really know what love is. You know, it's like when you date somebody in high school and you were like, I was supposed to get married to them. They were my high school sweetheart. But, you know, you're young, your brain is still developing. You don't really know what it takes to really be in love with somebody. You just got those, you know, those puppy eyes and everything. But when you really are secure in yourself, when you know yourself, when you know what you want, and you're willing to find and go out and risk your heart out and put your heart on the line for somebody, I mean, that's something that can't be taken the least at all. Like, that's not lightweight, that's heavyweight. That's a heavyweight decision. And I think in this day and age, you know, we see that a lot of people don't understand how heavy it is to tell a person that you love them. Like, saying you love somebody, that means that you are willing to do anything for them. When they have nobody else to lean on, you're the person right there. When they need some help with this and that, you're the person. That's what love is. Love isn't just, you know, you like going to dates together and, you know, having sex and kissing and everything like that. Like, no, love is more deeper than that. And films like this really show you that love is very important. It's a drug almost. You know, once you have it, you can't get enough of it. And that's why breakups are so hard. Like, I remember when I broke up out of a long-term relationship, it felt like my world was ending. Like, it felt like that it was the end for me, because I put my heart into it. I put everything into it. And for it to turn out to not turn into fruition or turn into something like involving marriage, it hurt me. Like, you know, thankfully I recovered from all that, and I'm on that new path now to create something bigger and better with my new relationship. You know, breakups, love, I mean, it's a tough combination for someone to handle. And you can see in the movie when Michael and May are in the midst of having an argument, when Michael's talking about he has to go to London, I don't think really May was really angry about the fact that she didn't tell him. That is one reason why, but I think she's also kind of upset because she was feeling something for him and she really wanted to go all the way with this. And now with him being in London, it kind of throws a monkey wrench into their plans.
I'm so glad that you brought up Andy and Rachel, because there's a scene at the end between Rachel and May where she talks specifically about, you know, being jaded is so comfortable, and she's kind of like very sarcastic throughout the film, and this is kind of like a different side for her. It's a very like deep subplot throughout this movie, but it really works. And it brought me to this point of a kind of like reflection to say, you know, relationships are something that should help you grow, but not necessarily outright change you, because relationships in the long period of time, whether it is a romantic relationship or it is just a relationship between friends, it is going to grow you in multiple different ways. Whereas, you know, someone that is just trying to change really quick is just going to change at the drop of a hat. And relationships should not do that whatsoever. Like, relationships should help you grow and continue to, you know, refine yourself as a person, refine yourself in your taste, your vantage points, you know, what you think, how you do everything. You know, relationships should help you become a better person in the long run. We all want happiness, and
being jaded is comfortable. It's a way to protect yourself, but it's not happiness. And, you know, when she meets this guy at a party, you know, she was definitely sizing him up. How old are you? What do you do? Like, just very checking off the list, like, oh, this guy is not the type of person that I should be interested in, but I am. And why is that? And why have I already left the party with him? And like, why am I now like dating him? And, you know, things are going great. So it's, you know, again, it's like, it's just those, you know, one of those like intangible, you know, things, these emotions, like we strive for happiness. And it's, and you're right. It has changed her or helped her grow, you know, for the better, because she's, you know, she's looking past what she thinks she should want in a relationship and just being with somebody who makes her smile. Like that, sometimes that's like all it is. Like you see couples where you're like, how did those two get together? They probably just make each other smile. Like that's it. Every day, you know, sitting, reading the paper, or, you know, going for a walk, or, you know, having your cat crawl on you while you're trying to do an interview. This is Jasper. Yeah, it's just, you know, it doesn't always make sense. And that's, you know, and that's another reason why, you know, the careers and, you know, the jobs that these people have, they are, you know, people in their 30s who are very career driven, very logical. They're, you know, planning the rest of their lives, and then just, you know, they just get, you know, just taken for, you know, what am I trying to say? Like they just get thrown for an emotional loop, basically. And that's what love is. And you make it work because you found that person that just makes you happy. They just make you happy. And you want to be with them. So you compromise, you make sacrifices, you make it work. You learn about yourself, you learn about that person because you want to be there. You know, there's nothing more compelling, you know, than a deep emotional connection, you know, which is why breakups are so hard. You know, it's not logical. It's not logical, but, you know, it's there. That's it. You know, flying back and forth from New York to London isn't logical. Dating, you know, a 24-year-old intern that you met at, you know, a movie premiere, it's not logical. But if it makes you happy, if it brings you joy, if it takes you from A to B, then that's what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. There's something that Celeste talked about that I want to kind of unpack real quick, because Celeste brings up a good point when he's talking about how like casually we throw around the L word when you're talking about in relationships, where there is this one of the things that I love to do in my spare time is I study scripture. And so part of that journey is trying to understand the original language in which it was written and kind of like what it means for them, because it's different. And when you read some of the context in the New Testament specifically for the word love, there's the Greeks had 4 different kinds of love, and they all meant something else differently. You know, it'd be the equivalent of saying that I love my wife the same way that I love tacos. I would never say that. Because obviously I'm not going to go out and get a joint bank account with tacos. Like, it's just inconceivable. But, you know, there has to be a weight to the way that we discuss love and the way that we lay down our lives for those that are husbands, wives, significant others, partners. You have to be willing to stand up and, you know, at a moment's notice, really say that you would sacrifice your life, say that you would sacrifice every part of your being to make that person happy. And that's what love is. Love is about taking a chance. It's about doing, as Lucy was just saying, the illogical sometimes. But, you know, it makes sense to you, and there has to be a weighted difference on how we view that vantage point. Love isn't just something that you throw around casually. Like, I love slasher films, but that's not a healthy thing for me to, you know, just kind of throw around, because that would make me look very unstable and unbalanced to some people. And that's fine. But, you know, I don't love them to the degree of my wife. Like, my wife, like, there are nights where, like, she'll have to, like, be away from me, and, like, it hurts me physically to go to bed without her. And that's kind of the love that, you know, we're talking about here, specifically, where you kind of see Michael and May kind of go through.
Another interesting point, to piggyback off of what both of you were saying about not throwing the word around so casually, is that Michael and May never say "I love you." They don't. It's about wanting to be with you so much that they want to explore. They want to figure out a way to make it work, but they never say "I love you." But it's more expression. You know, love is there, but they never say, "I love you." They say, "I don't want to be practical. I want to be with you. I want to make this work. I want to figure out how to be together."
And then you also got to think about it that it's much easier to say "I love you" than to actually show the actions of loving somebody. Like, I have seen, you know, some of my friends, and I've seen people around me go through these dysfunctional relationships where they either have a relationship where they're arguing with this person over social media. Like, I've seen, like, statuses where, like, a couple will be arguing on the same status, and then the next day later you'll see, like, "Oh, I love my baby." And I was like, wait a minute, y'all were just staging your argument in front of millions of people on Facebook. Like, what's going on here? Or you see where people will say, "Oh, like, you know, I mean, I cheat and stuff, but, you know, these girls or these men, they don't matter to me. You know, you're the one that matters to me." And that's not really love, you know. It's easier to say things rather than show it. The actions have to be there. You know, your dedication has to be there. And it can't be something where it's like, it's a job and you're only working 8 hours a day, and then boom, done. Like, hey, like, I'm only in a relationship for 8 hours, and then boom, after this, I go and do my own thing. No, it's a full-time, 24/7, 365 job. And there are going to be hard times. Like, it's not like the, you know, the classic films we have where it's like, oh, boy meets girl and girl meets boy, and then all of a sudden they get together. All their problems don't exist anymore. They ride off in the sunset. It's happily ever after. No, happily ever after is like for that honeymoon. But then when you get back from that honeymoon, then that's when the real work starts. And I'm glad that you brought it up, Lucy, about how they never said they never said the word love to each other. I never had noticed that until now. And I think it's very important because they're still in a kind of probation period with each other. You know, they still don't know if this is going to be a long-term thing. They want it to be a long-term thing. They're working towards it, but life is crazy. Life is random. You just don't know how things are going to turn out. So you have to take it one day at a time. But if you have a promise, if you have a dedication, if you have attachment, a connection with each other that is special and unique, then hey, it can work. And now it's not going to work for everybody. I mean, there's a reason why divorce is still has a high rate in America and all around the world. You know, sometimes you get with somebody, you think it's going to work out, and it just doesn't, and that's okay. You know, y'all just wasn't the right two people to get together. You know, but it can't be a thing where you break up with somebody, then all of a sudden it's like, all girls or all men are just bad and stuff, and you know, I'm just going to marry myself. Like, I can understand the self-love and the self-esteem. I appreciate that, but hey, at the end of the day.
Oh.
I think he froze.
If we, go through life.
Coalesce.
Okay, everybody's back. I was like, everybody
Yeah.
down on me.
You froze there you froze for a second. Go.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go back to what you were saying real quick. Coalesce. Are you still there? You frozen again?
I froze again. Let it go. Let it go.
Yeah, my turning wheel is turning wheel's going right now. But I can still see you though. I'm still here.
I've actually written, stories that are similar. Like I love writing characters and relationships that are as realistic as possible. Especially with the insta love aspect, because you want characters, you want to read about people who, even though they're in these really cool settings and doing these really cool things, you want them to feel like actual people. And I wrote one couple. Actually, my most popular book, it's called Blind Date with a Book Boyfriend, where they go through the whole book. They never say I love you, and it's basically their HEA is just a plan to be in the same place so they can keep dating each other, so they can figure things out. It's not like a, kind of I love you, let's run away together. It's just like, we have something here and I want more. So how can we do that? And they actually, there's an epilogue where you do see that it all worked out for them. But, in the meat of the story, it was just them just getting to know each other. It's just one long, what did somebody in a review compare it to? It's a movie with Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy where they just spend the whole day together.
Before Sunrise.
That's it. Yeah, so it's kind of like a Before Sunrise movie. She's in California for a job interview. She's from New York. And she's in a romance bookstore, and she just bumps into this guy who starts flirting with her, and he convinces her to hang out with him, and they just spend the whole day together. And, it's time for her to go back, and, they figure out a way to, like, keep going. But it's, they never say I love you. They just know that they care about each other. There's something tangible between them that they want to explore. And then I have another couple, and another one of my most popular books called Everything's Better with Kimberly. And the book ends and they have their happy ending and there's an epilogue. But in the next book, which is told from the point of view of Kimberly's brother, whenever you see glimpses of Kimberly and Adam, who are the couple from Everything's Better with Kimberly, they're still arguing about the same things that they were arguing about in Everything's Better with Kimberly, but they're in love with each other, they're engaged, the relationship is great, but things just don't get magically fixed because you say I love you. You still, even though they their relationship is strong and they love each other, they still have things that they will continue to work on as their relationship progresses. That stuff doesn't go away just because their book is over.
Yeah, relationships are one of those things that you're continuously like working on. It's like buying a house. Like you are continuously renovating or like updating and like alternating some sort of it. And you constantly have to work at it. Like I love my wife to death. And like there are some days where like it feels like you're doing a another job to like do it, because I sometimes come home and I'm like, I don't feel like doing anything, like, but I know that there are like dishes that need to be put away and dinner that needs to be made and like just everything. Like even tonight before we started recording, like it was my night to make dinner. Had a really long day, didn't feel like doing it, but again, me loving my wife like and wanting to honor her, I was wrapping up dinner as she came home, and so it's just about like little sacrifices and really making sure that you are placing the other person ahead of yourself. Super marriage tip: always serve.
Yeah, totally. So that's, and there's another really great line in Everything's Better with Kimberly where she's she's having a conversation with her mom, and her parents have been married or maybe they've been together for at least 30 years. And they were a relationship that happened pretty quickly because Adam and Kimberly fall in love over the course of a week. So there's like a lot of emotional deep diving there to kind of sell, a week-long romance. And, she asks her mom, hey, what is it weird falling in love so fast? And her mom says, the reasons why I love your father today are different than the reasons that I loved him 30 years ago. Meaning, the love is always there, but as your relationship changes and evolves, you change and evolve, and your love changes and evolves, Like, I love, that my husband is such an amazing father to our kids. But when I was dating him, that's not why I loved him, because we didn't have any kids. So, the relationships continually grow. And her mom also quotes Common, where she says, it don't take a whole day to recognize sunshine, which is like, is it weird falling in love so fast? Well, how long does it take you to know the sun is shining? If you find something and you recognize it, then you know it's there. Like with Andy and Rachel. Was it Rachel? What was her name?
Yeah, it was Rachel.
Just like with Andy and Rachel, like she was literally you could see her trying to talk herself out of liking this guy, but there was something there right away. And that's just how it works sometimes. But it's, but beyond that first date, beyond that first week, that first year, that whatever, it's, how are you going to make that work? And in Rachel's case, she had to give up her, preconceived notions of what relationships are supposed to be and what her life was supposed to be, and just, see what happens.
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to bring up is that we can't go without talking about this film's soundtrack. I mean, I think romantic films get enhanced by the music, by the tone that gets set. I really love the jazz, the piano, some of the percussion notes that were coming in throughout the film. And I love the source music that they're bringing in. There's Patti LaBelle, there's the internet, there's Mos Def, Al Green, of course, the great Al Green. I mean, a big variety of music. And I know Josh sent me a message yesterday talking about how he couldn't get I think it was 2 days ago, where you talked about where you couldn't get the soundtrack out of your head. And I feel you, man. I hope you went and added some songs to your Spotify or something.
Yeah. So I watched it the Monday before we're recording this, and we recorded another celebration of diversity episode that night. It was Moonlight, and that was the soundtrack to this movie is so freaking good. Like I don't remember the last time like I was so like enthused by a soundtrack for a film.
Yeah, Moonlight was just a perfect film. Just everything, like you could watch it and just focus on one aspect of the film. Like you could watch it like on mute and just look at how beautifully shot it is and how beautifully lit everyone is and everyone's facial expressions. And you could go through and like just listen to it and not even see the picture. Just everything is just so perfect and so beautiful and so artistic and cinematic and just gorgeous. I love that movie. Love it.
One of the last things that I wanted to address before we kind of get out of here is my favorite moment in this film. I shared in the beginning is the scene between May and the kids. First time that she gets to meet Michael's nieces, and they're like, oh, you're Teresa, and he's like, no. So they kind of have this like exchange. And Lucy, you had talked about it earlier about kind of how like when you come out of a relationship, there's almost a traumatic level that comes with that. And, you know, at what point in the relationship do you kind of start to open up and share past traumas from relationships and scars? You know, because there could be something that your current relationship does that reminds you of a past relationship, and which in turns also reminds you of a past trauma, which could trigger PTSD. So I kind of wanted to end kind of talking about some of the, you know, kind of like first moments, like at what point do you start to share? I know for my wife and I was pretty honest and pretty open about my stuff. I think past relationships for us was a conversation that took place probably within the first 2 months of us just talking and getting to know each other. But I kind of wanted to get your guys' opinion and then see kind of where you landed on that stuff. How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
I think, I mean, for me, that's another way to delve into my characters, because we are products of our experience and how we process those experiences. So, in my book, Everything's Better with Kimberly, she's a character that has anxiety disorder, and it played a very prominent role. I mean, because if you have any kind of disorder, it shapes who you are as a person, and it featured very prominently in her last relationship, and ultimately, her breakup. It ended in a really traumatic experience, and it kind of really shaped her opinions about relationships, and her reluctance to get into a relationship with another person, no matter how nice they are. Those past experiences really made her not want to even explore being in a relationship with another person. One, because her past relationship ended badly, and also because she has anxiety disorder and doesn't want to have to navigate, just you have a disorder, you're navigating it yourself, but when you have somebody else in your life, you almost feel like you have to like guide them through it as well, and that can be kind of exhausting if it's not the right person. So yeah, in order for that character to grow and change and give another relationship a chance, she had to get it out of the way early on. And a lot of my characters, pretty much everyone's in therapy in my books, because therapy is awesome.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think it's important, especially with somebody that you're going to spend the rest of your life with, or potentially spend the rest of your life with, it's important to like get it out there as early as possible, especially if it's the type of past experience that really kind of shape your current views. like I think all relationships are X, Y, and Z because my ex-boyfriend did this. Like that's something you need to like hash out like pretty much as soon as you are either, probably better before you start dating somebody else, like talk to somebody else about it and then start dating. But, things like that are going to shape your relationship, your future relationships, you just should get it out of the way as soon as possible. And, I like communication and openness. And I tend to show that in my books as well. Just people just like talking through stuff because, how else are you going to make it?
Yeah, the sooner the better, as I like to say. I know for me, usually in my relationships, there's a period right there where you're trying to get to know the person, and you don't want to become too forceful. You don't want to be like, "Hey, tell me all your secrets." Like it doesn't work down like that. It's a gradual. You have to make sure that the other person's comfortable with you. You have to be comfortable with the other person. Because sometimes we don't like to bring up things about ourselves. Sometimes there are things that has happened to us in the past, something traumatic, something that made us paint us in a bad light, and we're afraid about being judged. We're afraid of being looked at as, instead of like this great new person that we met, oh, now all of a sudden we're bringing up our past, and now all of a sudden we're not in the brightest of lights. But that is who we are at the end of the day. You have to be honest with yourself. You got to be honest with the person that you're trying to deal with, because you want them to be honest with you as well. It isn't like, hey, now you told me your secrets, now I'm just not going to tell you anything, we're good. No, it has to, like I said before, it's a give and take. You tell me if whatever you're comfortable with, whenever the time frame is, when you're comfortable with sharing something with me, then share it. I've never been a person to kind of rush it, but I always say that it's better to do it before you get into anything serious, because once you're serious, feelings are there, your heart's there, and then people are going to feel like you betrayed them if you keep something that is going to impact relationship. If you keep it in the dark instead of getting it out in the open before and letting a person digest it and understanding what's going on, then you're going to have a problem. So it's always best to be open, but you also want to be comfortable with how open you are.
Hold on. Yeah. And I think also a huge part of it, in relationships, everything. Yeah. I was like, why do I smell cat food all of a sudden? And then it's just like in the trash can. Okay. So for anybody who's not in the chat, my kittens have figured out how to open the garbage can. And I'll get back to my answer. The more you keep those things in or keep them away, they're going to come out eventually, and you don't want to be too invested. Like, there's a point in the book where, Kimberly kind of had, she didn't really necessarily have an anxiety attack, because there's variations. There's a panic attack, there's anxiety attacks, and then there's your general anxiety about life. And, she had one of those moments, and she was thinking to herself, well, it's good that he saw this now before, so that he understands what's going on. I have another book where, a character has a chronic illness that, she has a chronic illness that she deals with. She has to take medication, and she, sleeps with a CPAP machine, and she may not be able to have children, and she's also in therapy. So, those are things that they're not bad at all by any stretch of the imagination. But, if you're going to be in a relationship with somebody, you're going to want someone who understands those things and wants to be with you, not despite those things, but because of those things, because those things are, part of what makes you who you are. And, a lot of times we have, the tendency to kind of hide those things about ourselves. Like I have ADHD, which now I love it. I think it's like one of the best things about me, but I didn't always feel that way. And, you try to hide those things, and they kind of, manifest into other things. And anyone who's going to be any part of your life, whether it be a lover or a friend or anything like that, you know, should know those things about you and understand them. So again, just, you know, the earlier the better. Honesty is the best policy. Because then you're not wasting their time, you're not wasting your time. You know, you want to know if you're bipolar and you're with somebody who's going to be a dick about that, you want to know that right away. So, yeah.
All right, well, I think that's going to do it for us on this episode of Victims and Villains. One more time, Lucy, let us know where people can find the books and follow you online.
Yeah, so I am basically on every social media platform at Lucy Eden Author. My website is lucyeden.com, and you can pretty much put Lucy Eden into any search engine, anywhere you can purchase a book, and my books will come up. And yeah, I've written a bunch of them, and I tend to think they're really good. But you can also DM me on any social media platform if you want like book recommendations or anything like that. But yeah, I'm pretty communicative, and I like making friends online, so feel free to reach out. But yeah, just type in Lucy Eden, you'll find me.
Also, you can find me. I'm taking a little mini break from Twitter, so I wouldn't check out my Twitter real quick. But you can find me on Instagram. Letterboxd is Black Nerd Magic. You can find me on Facebook under my real name, Caless Davis. That's Caless. And also check out our friends from over here in the Pacific Northwest, Feeling Film Podcast. And also, if you want to check out any episodes that me and Josh have done in the past, and including some of the episodes dealing with our celebration of diversity, go check out Victims and Villains.
Yes, victimsandvillains.net will get you guys episodes of past episodes that we have done, also sister and brother podcast as well. You guys can also find out movie reviews, all of our social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, wherever you guys get podcasts from. But most importantly, check out our mental health resource library, all of which you guys can find in the show notes wherever you guys are currently listening to this episode. Thank you guys for hanging out. We're going to get spooky on our next episode because we're talking about 2020's Spiral with Black Women Are Scary. So until next time, look at this photograph.